With the beam secured to our wall, we're ready to hang the post off the end of it. I have the post resting on scrap pieces of timber to protect our paint finish as we add the bracket that'll be set into the concrete footing. All the work we did earlier pre-fitting this bracket on the bottom of the post helps this process come together easily.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
In this video series, I take you through the process of how we created this backyard art studio. It features 3 large windows and glass doors to allow natural light to fill the interior. It also includes an outdoor covered awning space with a hardwood batten privacy screen. We chose to use passive house design systems in the construction to make the most of the year-round weather conditions. In the previous episode, we finished the framing for the walls in preparation for laying out the rafters on our roof. I sorted through the stock 6-meter planking so I could find the straightest pieces to use, and using a saw and chisel cut the bird mouths out for the rafters. Then pre-painted all the timber on sawhorses in preparation for laying it out on our walls. I then secured the rafters in place by installing the pre-painted blocking. In this episode, we continue to add our pre-painted roof blocks and construct the posts and beams for the outside covered area of our art studio. With all the blocks installed on both supporting walls, I set up a string line to check the alignment before moving on to the next step. To cover the gap between the block and the wall on the high side of our roof, I've screwed and glued smaller dimension blocks that sit in between the rafters and connect to the top of the wall plate. This adds extra strength to the counterlevered awning that'll experience heavy wind loads. Another part of adding reinforcement between the walls and the roof is adding purpose-made brackets. After attaching the bracket in the appropriate place with the small spikes provided on the bracket, we add specialized galvanized nails.
As a young girl, it feels we're mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care in the world. I was one rich little girl.
After attaching brackets to all the rafters at both ends, I add some additional bracketing to connect the studs into the top plate of our wall. I'm only adding these brackets in the corner of our building. The idea is by having extra reinforcement in the corner of the building, it'll help stop the roof being lifted off in a heavy wind event.
Daydreamer, kidnap me. Take me back, all the way back to them days. Running around in a gown and a crown, barefoot.
The final piece of reinforcement for our corner was to use a heavy galvanized bracket that bolts the second last rafter into the top plate. With all the reinforcement elements installed, we can start adding the next row of blocks. These blocks are seen from the inside along the top edge of the ceiling, so we've painted them green so they'll match the rafters. I'm installing these blocks the same way we installed the previous blocks that are painted black because we see them from the outside. I'm using 3 clamps and a temporary piece of timber on the top of the block to lock it in squarely between both rafters, and then add the 14 gauge timber screws. Once it's secure, I remove all the clamps and move on to the next block.
Every step, every breath, for you, my head's up over the clouds. For you, if there's a valley, I'd build a bridge so that you could get by. Or I'd grow wings so we could fly. Daydreaming is my new middle name. This is not a game for me. Imagine
blocks complete on this end of the building, we move our attention to the eaveless side of our structure. Here I'm adding the blocks that will fill out the middle of the roof to support the marine ply sheets that we'll be adding later. They're laid out in 1220 centres because the marine ply comes in that dimension. Standard sheeting material in the metric world comes in 240mm by 120mm dimensions. But sometimes we end up with materials from imperial measurement countries like America, so it ends up with a larger dimension than our standard. And in this case we're taking advantage of that. With the slightly larger dimension imperial sheeting, we'll be able to cover the whole interior of our ceiling with 3 sheets. Here you can see how later in the project we'll be installing the marine ply panels in a brick pattern layout. This adds a lot of strength to our roof structure. So the blocks we're installing now will support the edges of all the marine ply sheeting.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane. And as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise. And now there's something in the air and a sparkly shimmer on our skin, restoring everything within.
I have over 50 blocks to install that'll be visible from the inside of our structure, so they all have to be painted green to match the rafters. To facilitate this, I've set up a painting station under our temporary shelter. Here I've got about 20 blocks lined up on some planks as a way of efficiently getting them all painted. This way you can paint one facet of a block all the way along the line, and when it's dry you can turn them over and paint the other side.
Undercover agents of the other, beyond gravel, beyond all. Hand in hand, building castles out of sand, reaching for the grand. As willows align, we lose track of time. Head up high, now we climb.
Because of the limited space we have protected from the weather and rain to do our paint preparation, I work in batches. As soon as the paint is dry and solid in one batch, I install them so I can make room for preparation for the next. I'm installing the blocks in continuous linear rows. This is a way of ensuring that we keep the rafters parallel and square. Because of our strategy of pre-painting as much of the material as possible before installation, I'm constantly preparing material about a week before I want to install it. Here I'm sanding and priming the beams that'll hold the roof up on the open area at the side of the art studio. I ordered custom-built laminated hardwood beams so they'll be able to hold up the roof load that's on top of them. They're 90 by 190mm and 2.4 meters long. I'm giving them a light sanding all over and rounding off the corners before priming and painting them.
Tonight we'll turn minutes into days, and nothing's gonna make me look away. Peel off the layer and breathe. Lift up your head and lead. Count the stars up before you leave.
Last week we completed the principal framing of the roof that'll be the inside part of the studio. We'll be building the outside veranda awning section next week. Yesterday we got this last rafter locked in place. This presented a few design challenges because we don't have any eaves on this side of our studio. or on the back side of the studio. So I had to set this rafter in a specific place because it has to meet up with the wall we'll be adding later. And you'll be able to see when we're finished how this rafter matches the plane of this wall that comes down the side of our studio.
When the exterior foam board insulation is added, and then finally the cement sheet and battens, you can see how we achieve a crisp, eveless transition between the wall and the roof. With the framing complete on the west side of the building, I'm turning my attention to the east side. My client wanted a covered entertainment space on this side of her studio, so I'm using a post and beam construction system to extend the roof line 2.4 meters over this open area. The beam connects to a checkout at the top of the post, secured with 4 12mm bolts. To prepare the post and beam for assembly, I'm building a temporary bench to do the checkout on the top of the post that will connect the beam, and on the bottom of the post for the brackets that go into the concrete footing. I'm adding some foam paper to our temporary bench to protect the pre-painted finish to the post and beam whilst we work on them. I start the preparation for cutting out the checkouts in the 2 posts by calibrating my saw. I'm making sure the blade is set at a true 90-degree angle, and the depth of the cut will be at 90mm, which is the width of our beam. After setting up the post on our temporary bench, I use my tape measure and speed square to mark out the cut lines. After completing all the pencil marks on the post, I do one last double check with my tape measure on the structure to make sure we're not going to cut it in the wrong place. The posts and beams we're using were custom ordered and took weeks to get here, and I have no spares, so it's important I double check my measurements before making a cut.
Say that kiss pretty please. Try to reminisce over me. Know that I will cherish your memories.
After cutting the post to length, I sand the edges smooth, then transpose the measurement of the beam over to the post in preparation for the checkout cut. Here you can see how I'm using my speed square as a guide for the saw to make an accurate 90-degree cut. I then make multiple cuts at roughly 10mm intervals to make it easier for me to chisel out the checkout.
Feel off and breathe. Lift up your head and lead. Count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please. Try to reminisce over me. Know that I will cherish your memories.
I use my speed square to make sure I've cut the checkout to the correct depth. Then place the beam inside the checkout in place to make sure it fits properly. I use my spirit level to confirm that the beam is sitting completely flush with the post, then prepare to drill the holes that'll connect the two together. By placing the washers over the pencil marks for the drill holes, I can confirm that we'll have an appropriate bolt layout on the beam. The first hole I'm drilling is to house the countersunk bolt and washer. I test fit the washer and bolt to get the appropriate depth for this hole.
Turn around and show your face. Let me see parts of you. Oh my, our bodies in the race, flowing easy, and I can reach you from the distance. I can, so beautiful. I can hear you, but in the silence.
I've changed the drill bit to a 12.5 diameter for drilling the holes that go all the way through the beam and the post for our 12mm bolts. The important thing to remember when drilling these holes is to try and keep the drill at a true 90-degree angle to the beam. This way our holes will line up properly on the other side of the post. When all the holes are drilled, I remove the beam and clean out the holes in the post. Then check that the bolts can fit cleanly through the holes for assembly later on. With the checkout complete on the top of the post, I set up to do the checkout for the bottom of the post that allows the brackets that's set into the concrete to connect into the post neatly. I'm using the bracket as a template to mark out where we'll do the checkout and how deep we'll make it. By having all the cut points accurate and clearly marked, it avoids making mistakes once you get the cutting tools involved.
We will dance away the gloomy days right here. We are silver line, one of a kind, you and me. Stay close when it rains, let me keep parts of you.
I duplicate the process on the other side of the post, then use the bracket as a template to drill the holes through and fit the bolts.
Hand in hand, every night. And I will watch you, breath after breath, hold on. So beautiful. And if you fall, I will catch you. We will dance away gloomy days right here.
With all the cutouts complete and holes drilled for the first post and beam, I duplicate the process on the second ones and then prepare to finish the painting on them before installation. The main reason I go to the trouble of pre-painting the materials is to protect them from the weather before we get the roof on to cover them. Having the checkouts at the top of the post painted also helps stop dry rot occurring between the connection points of the post and beam. This will extend the life of the structure. Because the rain looks like it's setting in, I'm going to extend the tarpaulin in our temporary shed to give us some shelter from the weather whilst we finish the painting on the post and beam.
Give me tears so I can cry. And give me life so I don't die. Give me tears so I can cry.
Another place that can be vulnerable to dry rot are the countersunk holes for the bolts and washers. With the posts and beams ready for assembly, I need to construct a temporary scaffold to help seat them in the concrete footings. I'm building the scaffold out of framing material we'll be using later in the project. We're making good use of our temporary rain shelter and are able to carry out most of the work under cover.
Give me life so I don't die. Give me tears so I can cry. Give me life so I don't die.
There's many ways you could set a post and beam like this, but because I'm working by myself and I'm trying to keep costs down, I'm choosing to build a temporary step ladder. This way I can safely and slowly walk the beam up to the height I need it. Before I secure the last piece at the top of the temporary scaffold, I double check with my spirit level that the beam's going to sit completely horizontal. I add a couple more steps to my ladder system to make it easy for myself, and then start the process of walking the beam up into place.
Mud on your boots tell the story of where you've been. Travel, beat up, warning with settled soul. Trust your God, you have earned at least that.
After securing the beam with some clamps, I double check that it's sitting perfectly horizontal, and then set up a string line to make sure it's in alignment with the wall it's going to be connecting to. With everything aligning properly on our first beam, I repeat the process for the second beam. This will be a little easier because it's not set quite as high.
Love heart is not in vain. Scarred by the good fight. Weathered skin from the sun. We're proud you have lived well. Mud on your boots tell the story of where you've been. Traveled, beat up, worn in with settled soul. Trust your God, you have earned at least that. Age has proven to be kind.
With the beams set in place and completely level, I secure them to our walls using a heavy bolt and a flat bar washer. I'm only adding one bolt at this time so I can allow for adjustment when we're setting the concrete on the post. Before hanging the post off the end of our beam, I attach the bracket that'll be seated in the concrete footing on the bottom of the post. After raising the post and setting it in the hole for the concrete, I need to align the top of the post and the beam so I can get the bolts to go through the holes we prepared earlier. These bolts are purpose designed to jam into the timber when you hammer them in. This way they won't spin when you tighten the nuts.
9 to 5 was my dad's advice. Don't think twice, I want the luxury life. My beauty can lose it, I'll use it. I'll take what I want. Oh yeah. A whole lot of ticking, but not enough time.
With our post hanging from the beam completely vertical and plumb, I add a few braces at the bottom and start the process of adding the concrete footing.
Spending your Sunday at the gym, trying to fit in. Counting the days until I meet my future husband. I try to be kind to myself. I said, girl, you got this. A whole lot of ticking, not enough time. A whole lot of sweat for a trophy wife.
As the first post sets up in the concrete footing, we get started on the second post. One of the advantages of setting a post with this system is you can hang a string off the end of the beam with a weight on it to calculate where you need to dig the hole for the footing. The concrete foundation for this second post has to be significantly larger, as the post on the high side of our studio has to carry the weight of the cantilevered overhanged awning. I'm using a combination of the wrecking bar, post hole digger and shovel to excavate this hole. I'm trying to keep the excavation as clean and tidy as possible, as due to the wet conditions all the soil's extremely muddy and sticky.
Not enough time.
Because I'm pouring such a large concrete footing, I'm adding some steel reinforcement to ensure that it doesn't crack and subside over time. As part of securing the beam to the existing wall, I'm adding a 2x4 that sits underneath it, creating a ledge for the beam to sit on. After checking the 2x4 has a nice tight fit, I add liquid nails glue and secure it with 14 gauge screws.
Slow traffic cause me a stress. Show no panic, I'm just born in a dress. And I know now I'm older, I'm done. I do what I want.
With the beam secured to our wall, we're ready to hang the post off the end of it. I have the post resting on scrap pieces of timber to protect our paint finish as we add the bracket that'll be set into the concrete footing. All the work we did earlier pre-fitting this bracket on the bottom of the post helps this process come together easily.
Counted the days until I meet my future husband. I try to be kind to myself. I said, girl, you got this. The whole lot of ticking, not enough time, not enough time. A whole lot of sweat, trophy wife, trophy wife.
With the post firmly attached to the beam, I make some final slight adjustments with a wood wedge to make sure the beam's completely horizontal. To secure the post in its vertical position, I'm adding some scrap bracing at the bottom to hold it in place. When I'm satisfied the post is perfectly plumb and vertical on both planes, I start adding the concrete in the hole we prepared for the footing.
Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you. Been walking down the street so many times, my feet know every brick and stone. Could wear a blindfold. No matter what I do, I'm coming home to you. And I don't know why, don't know why, don't know why I'm always feeling homesick.
The final step in finishing the concrete footing is double checking that it's at the right height for paving that'll be coming much later in the project. I do one final check with my level to make sure the post is completely vertical and plumb in both dimensions, and then let it set up overnight.
I have seen many places where the beauty never ends.
Join me in the next episode as we add rafters to the post and beam we just constructed and continue to finish the framing of our roof in preparation for our sheeting material.
Could you hike back to it, fight with it, sit with it?